Hi everyone, hope you're well. I know it's been a while since we've done a Connect Leaders series from GCS. Took a bit of time out to build back up the pipeline of leaders in our network that we could talk to. We've got a run of some really, really great people to speak to. We're starting with David Lindop, ex-CDO of Ernst Young, EY, and is now as a business consultant going out to businesses and working with them on how they work with data, particularly work with AI, and particularly work with the machine learning to improve their business, but also how that can make their business more efficient. So here's David. Hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. Good afternoon, David. How are you?
Yeah, very, very good, David. How are you doing?
Really well, really well. It's been a while. It's been about 6 months since I last done one. As we were just discussing, I was a little bit nervous coming in to remember if I remembered how to do it, but here we go. I've back into the flow of things. But before we start speaking, David, I'd just like to introduce yourself. So obviously we've got David Lindop here, who is the founder of Anti-Respective, which is an AI consultancy. And he's a former CDO of EY Consulting with over 20 years experience. And we're very excited to have him here. He's a very interesting character. With a lot of experience. And I think obviously what more could we kickstart the GCS Connect Leader series than with someone who has really depth and great knowledge about AI and how that links to data and how that can be used in the future. So I'm particularly interested in learning from you here, David, today to find out more about how that might even affect my own business and how you're seeing industry using it and the good side and the difficulties of all of that. So yeah, I've been very excited to do this. But yeah, I guess first off, what I always like to do, and obviously I know you've had a long and storied career, but tell me a little bit about yourself, about your journey as a leader. That's what we're always interested in first. Like, how did you get to this position, and what do you feel you bring to the world of leadership?
So there's a short answer to that question, David, and there's a long
Fantastic.
answer. I'll give you
This will be
the
the shortest
short
podcast
answer.
ever then.
Yeah, which is dumb luck. I
Okay,
have
fantastic.
stumbled aimlessly through my career doing things that interested me, and exciting things have turned up, and I followed them. I actually started out as a musician, and a lot of the lessons that I learned early in my career, playing in clubs in the northwest of England with hostile audiences and having bottles thrown at me and various things like that, that actually was the best training for being a consultant that you can imagine. Although I didn't actually realize that at the time. And I discovered technology. I discovered computers almost by accident because I'm relatively numerically challenged.
Right.
Which is difficult for somebody who started out life as an accountant. And I found the
Yes.
only way I could compete was by learning how to use spreadsheets. So I started very, very quickly understanding that I could use technology to compensate for some of the things I found hard in life, which freed me up to to focus more times on the creative things and the things that I found interesting. So I started off, very much, I used to be the Excel spreadsheet guy. And I
Yeah.
guess that was the beginning of my journey to data, which is quite interesting because it's almost gone full circle. I would not necessarily think of myself as a technology professional. I've always been a business professional first. And I think, I've spent about half of my career in industry and line roles, and about half of my career as a consultant advising others. And the consultancy has been incredible. I don't think I've ever had a client that I haven't learned at least as much from as they've learned from me, and probably an awful lot more. And I think the
Yeah.
opportunity to go and work with different businesses, identify the same problems in different situations, identify new problems, learn. I started off, I did a lot of work in telco, and which is a highly regulated, high margin, low volume business. I moved into financial services, which was also highly regulated around the time a lot of the retail banks were suddenly realizing that they were a high volume, low margin business. So I think, having had the opportunity to work across lots of different businesses, lots of different sectors, the common theme always being data, always being analytics, and always being customer, I've been able to take those insights and share those with others and bring them back. So long and varied career. Consultancy is, I guess, where I ended up because I love the variety. I love the new challenge and the opportunity to work with lots of different people.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. So before we start, obviously I'm a big music fan, David. So I'm gonna have to go back to your initial kind of journey. It's not on your LinkedIn. So just do quick aside. So what type of bands were you playing in? Do you know?
Oh,
Kind of.
it's nobody you would have ever heard of now, but I was in sort of I guess late 80s post punk bands. I'm a saxophone player,
Oh right,
and
okay.
I used to get quite a lot of work because saxophones are cool, and there weren't many saxophone players who weren't playing 100% jazz. So I basically toured around playing saxophone. I still play today. I still have
Oh wow,
yeah, I
fantastic.
still have an interest in music, and I I I still love live music of all kinds.
Oh brilliant. Well, I am. I could have a whole podcast on late 80s post punk. So yeah, we'll maybe
Yeah.
talk about that offline. But very
Bizarrely, I got my
interesting.
first job in consulting because the consulting partner I met had actually seen one of the bands I was in live, and we ended up talking the whole time about music. So there's
Oh,
that sort of
fantastic.
connection. That was
Well,
actually what moved me
it's very
across.
interesting because I always tell the story of when I joined GCS. But I was interviewed by the founder, was a guy called Chris Bartlett, and I hadn't got a clue what IT recruitment was. I didn't know. I just left university, did French and English. And my first interview, we sat down and we talked about the the pros and cons of state of rock music and dance music in the mid 90s, and we just talked about that for 30 minutes. And then he said, would you like a job? I was like, yeah, cool, sounds good. You seem cool. So it didn't got anything to do with the job or anything. So yeah, music is a great leveler, isn't it, in terms of relationships and that sort of thing,
There's
even
a
if you don't
pattern in
play.
there. Yeah, I think we should formalize that into the recruitment process a little bit more because it clearly
Yeah,
works.
exactly. It's good. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
fantastic. But going back therefore to yourself, we'll talk about more yourself as a leader. But what I'm really interested in is that build from Excel. I'm always fascinated by Excel because it seems to me that companies are basically trying to invent stuff that can maybe do things better than Excel or email, but generally they're failing. Because people still use Excel to such a huge level, don't they? Even in my business, right? We've got CRMs, we've got fantastic software, we've got all these amazing things. But if I look around here, I'm in my sales office today, I'm sure I'll see about 100 odd different Excel spreadsheets, right? It's an amazing invention, isn't it? And it's great that you kind of take that lead from Excel all the way through to the cool stuff you're doing now, right?
And there's a very strong connection. I think it's interesting that you say that. I mean, having worked as a data professional for
Mm.
a long time now, a lot of what we did in data until very recently was very structured, very formalized, very controlled. And you still find if people wanted things quickly or if they didn't know exactly where to look for things, they'd still go back to Excel. I think if you look at what, particularly Microsoft, I guess, are doing at the
Mm.
moment, embedding co-pilots into Excel, I think there's
Yeah,
something that happened during the pandemic when we suddenly realized actually the collaboration tools, the way we're joining everybody up, the way that we can record meetings like this one, the way we can drive all
yeah,
that forward, that actually brings us back into that Excel world. And if you imagine the world where you don't have to have everything structured, you don't have to have all of your data in one huge data lake, data warehouse, I
mm,
think actually AI and AI tools like Microsoft Copilot, like many others, they're actually going to reopen that world, but they're going to reopen that world in a very different way. Um,
mm,
if I have algorithms that can go through every single spreadsheet on my hard drive, or can go
mm.
through every spreadsheet in my organization and start bringing that data back, it changes everything. And I think
Yeah,
the interface between the business decision maker and technology has changed forever as a result of AI. The
yeah.
old
It's
days,
become it's become less of a little bit like music, right? You can play the saxophone. I can't play the saxophone. That seems like something that I would have to work for years to do. And I think like data science or programming or coding has got a very similar feel to that. Whereas the reason why Excel is an amazing tool to anyone really with a even half a brain can build an Excel spreadsheet, right? And now I think what you're saying here is that with these tools, you can make your knowledge of the business and your knowledge of Excel and building data to actually take you to a different level where it's not such a dark art. It's more of a business tool, right?
I think you're exactly right. And we honestly don't know where it'll lead. I
Mm.
mean, we're still in very early days on the AI journey. I mean, it feels like, tools like GPT-4o and Bard and things like that. It feels like, we've never seen anything as powerful as this. But this is still the first printing press. This is still Stephenson's rocket. We're still at the beginning
Mm.
of that journey. I think what's different and what I'm really excited about is that in the old world, and by the old world I mean two years ago,
Yeah.
it's changing that quickly. You needed special humans, hopefully like me, who knew how
Mm.
to talk to computers.
Yeah.
In the new world, computers know how to talk to regular humans. And that's a complete game changer. It disintermediates a whole load of, it doesn't take away the need for data management, data governance. It doesn't take away the need for data
Mm.
engineering, but it changes that emphasis. And I think it changes that world where you have to go and build something in a spreadsheet because your IT department hasn't developed exactly the analytics you need. I mean, now you can just ask and you get that data provided. And it's not perfect and it hallucinates, but by the way, so do humans. And I think it will fundamentally change the way we go about business. People talk about the fourth industrial revolution. And I think this really is the fourth industrial revolution. This is as important as the internet. And if
Yeah.
you then combine artificial intelligence, which we're very focused on, with 5G plus, with quantum computing, with some of the really cool things that's just around the corner on spatial computing,
Yeah.
enhanced reality, augmented reality, we're entering a completely new world of business. And it's a world of business where we've moved from being technology-centric organizations to being data-centric organizations.
Mm.
And that puts the business person back in the driving seat, which
Yeah.
is which is yeah, it's very, very different to what we're used to. And I think the paradigm shift, I think the rules are being reinvented. I don't know what they are. You don't know what they are.
No, no.
Yeah, and it's incredibly exciting to be part of shaping that.
Yeah. Well, GCS is certainly trying to ride that because we've now set up our GCS AI division, which is one of the reasons why we started speaking to yourself, David, because obviously, talking to leaders in that world is important. And yeah, it's certainly something we're seeing. A business like ours has had to pivot away from more traditional technology roles, which are maybe less in demand now, towards different types of roles. You talked about kind of prompt engineer, storyteller, you know, data scientists, etc., etc. These are much more, important in today's technology firm, and that's in the last 2 years, right? Things have switched quite a lot. But I wanted to just talk quickly, to kind of go into your previous role, as we mentioned. Obviously, you were kind of, for quite a few years, a very highly respected kind of CDO for EY, right? And just for those that don't know, as they're listening to this, what does that entail? So obviously it's a C-level C-suite position, but what does chief data officer entail within a business, particularly something like EY?
It's a really good question. And I think to some extent, we're all still defining the role of the CDO, whether it's the chief data officer. I think, CDOs in banking were very much governance related. I always used to pride myself on, we talk about defensive CDOs and
Yeah,
offensive CDOs. I always claimed that I was a very offensive CDO, as
yeah,
anyone who knows me will tell you. The reality is it's got to be a balance of both. It's
mm,
about making sure that you keep your data safe. It's about making sure that you keep your confidential data confidential. It's making sure that your data is used ethically, which sounds very easy, but you need to know a lot about the data, the
yeah,
circumstances under which that data was governed. But for me, first and foremost, it's about using the data. It's not
mm,
about locking the data up, protecting it, making sure that nobody can use it, and make it safe. It's about how can you leverage your data to drive real business outcomes, to drive real customer outcomes. And another area of interest for me is sustainability as well. So I think sustainability is a very data-rich area. Yeah,
yeah,
how can you use the data that you have to drive better outcomes for society, for the environment? So a chief data officer is ultimately the custodian of data, which is a major asset to the business. In EY, obviously, EY Consulting, we were an advisory organization. EY is an advisory organization, so it's also around making sure that you're getting insights from that data in a way that is compliant with all the regulations of an organization, but making sure you unlock that value. And that was
this is what we've learned. So when we go to a new customer, we can say, these are the things we've learned. We can't exactly tell you where we learned them from, but this is what we're learning, and this is what we're
in
thinking
a way
of.
that's consistent with the standards and the values of the organization, and the way that respects the commercial sensitivity and the confidentiality of that data. Now, it's sort of coming back to your Excel example. You still have regulations around that, but most people have a very strong instinct for how they should and shouldn't use their data. When you're using that data at an enterprise level, you've got to describe that data, you've got to tag that data, you've got to understand which client that data came from, what purpose, what permissions, what contracts are around it. So there's a big element of making sure that you understand the provenance of that data, but also with tools like Copilot, you need to describe that data. So if we look at administrative metadata, where that data came from, what the controls and permissions are around that data, what's down to descriptive metadata, what sort of data is this? If I ask my AI to find me all the information around sustainability metrics for telcos in Singapore, then if you think about how that works under the bonnet, I need to know, first of all, which information I'm allowed to access, which information I'm not, which is price sensitive, which is confidential. And then I need to know which of those thousands and thousands of structured data sources actually contain the information I need. So one of the things is around how you actually start tagging all of your data sources. This is a source of sustainability data. This is a source of strategic benchmarks. This data relates to telcos. This data relates to financial service organizations. There's a whole lot of cataloging that you have for that data. And even with AI, you still need to catalog that data. I would argue with AI even more. You need to catalog that data so you can find the information that you need quickly. And that's a big part of it. And then it's about just cataloging data and controlling data isn't enough. It's how do you monetize it? How do you streamline your existing processes, make them faster, make them better, make them cheaper? How do you develop completely new products and services? And that was very much the area of focus, and it's where I'm continuing to work.
And the new organization, which we'll obviously talk about, so sounds very exciting. And just going back to that role, then obviously one of the things you mentioned there was the offensive, not offensive. Let's call it proactive. And is that element of pushing the boundaries, learning, developing, being innovative. But then you talked about the kind of defensive side. I'm quite interesting. It's obviously because it's been a leaders podcast, like as advice for other leaders, for other organizations, what do you think the key things that people should be aware of? And this obviously links into things like compliance, GDPR, obviously working with consultancy. So what caused you to lie awake at night in your role as a CDO?
For me, the proactive, if you like, or the offensive and the defensive, two sides of the same coin. I don't think it's yin and yang. You can't look at one without the other. You can't really evaluate data risk unless you understand how you intend to use that data. And you can't really look at whether it's safe to use that data without understanding some of the risks, the regulations, the compliance. I think in the past, we've tended to have a more antagonistic type approach where we have compliance and risk people who focus on the compliance and risk, tell you can't use your data, and then we've got commercial people who are trying to find the ways around.
Ways around the risk and compliance team.
Which is not actually the way it should be. I think bringing those two roles together. I'm not a business specialist. I work with business specialists. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a risk and compliance specialist, but I work with risk and compliance specialists. And I think bringing those two roles together, it's going to be increasingly important. And I think, because we're seeing new use cases, new ways of using data, new technologies emerging, even questions like, should you record a Zoom meeting? Are you allowed to record a Zoom meeting? How long
Yeah.
should you store the Zoom meeting? I mean, there's lots of questions there,
Mm.
which lots of organizations are spending a great deal of time on understanding. From a legal point of view, you probably shouldn't because there's risk associated. From a productivity point of view, you absolutely should because it drives huge productivity savings, and it's one of the business cases that underwrites, some of the early use cases for AI. The reality is there's a balance between them, and being able to build that balance. I think it comes back to one of the things I've been reflecting on recently. Leaders in the new world have to be much more multi-skilled. I think we're entering the era of the polymath. I mean, I can remember very early in my career when I was at PwC, a partner came to me and she said to me, young man, so it must have been a long time ago, and she said to me, my best advice to you is at the moment you're doing technology, you're doing strategy, and you're doing process design. You can't focus on all three. You've got to pick one and get really, really good at it. And I agonize.
Which is a fair advice, particularly as you're growing your career, right?
It's good advice. It's good advice, and it was the right advice at the time, and it never sat well with me. And then almost the same day, I sat down with the CFO at Reuters, who actually said to me, one of the things I really like about you is the way you're able to bring together technology, process, and strategy in a way that makes sense for my business. So I left PwC and I joined Reuters. And I think actually, increasingly, as we have more algorithms that will take the load off us, I'm not an expert in SQL, but I've got technology now on my own laptop that will write complex SQL queries for me, complex inner joins. We're moving to a no-code, low-code environment. And people who understand how to leverage technology, people who understand the regulatory environment and compliance, but people who understand business, who understand industries, are going to be the most important people. And then prompt engineering is a new skill. It's not a traditional technology skill. It's about how to ask the right question to get the right answer. And I think everything's changing. So a lot of my advice to leaders now is to, the modern leader, I think, is a generalist, but has access to specialists. And those may be carbon-based specialists, those may be silicon-based specialists, but you need access to all that information. But actually what we really need, we quite want to talk about human in the center. But the human in the center in an AI context isn't just any ordinary human. It's got to be somebody who's got political sense, who understands the business, who understands the objectives behind it. It's a very different skill set. And I think a lot of our leaders need to be much more multidisciplinary than they have been in the past.
Yeah, no, I think as well, like, for another thing for me is you have to be, interested. I think that's another thing that as a leader, you can push a business forward by being interested in new technology and how it might kind of affect your business. And sometimes people are quite protective over, well, we always do it this way, right? And maybe the leader is the person that says, well, I know this is how we always did it, but this is not how we're going to do it in the future. And that's a leadership thing, isn't it? Showing that vision, not just in terms of this is the sales we're going to get, this is the way we're going to expand our business, but this is the way that we are going to do our business in the future.
Yeah, I agree, David. I think you've also got to remain curious as well. I can remember a workshop I did 2 or 3 years ago where we had a whole group of CIOs, CDOs, technology executives, and we were talking about robotics and automation. And one of the things that came out is that we all had more automation in our houses than we had in the business. We all got terribly excited about our Ring doorbells and how they're connected to our Philips Hue lights. And most of us were living in smart houses. And yet one of the questions was, actually, it's almost the consumer side which is driving things faster than business. And yet all of those individuals were very, very curious. They were experimenting. They were playing with these things at home. They didn't even realize they were doing it. They weren't consciously doing it. It's just a passion, a fascination for the area, and continuously learning. You don't get to a stage in your career, certainly these days, I don't think ever, where you think, right, I know how this is done, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to tell other people. You've got to be continually learning. And as the rules of the game are changing monthly at the moment, I think you've got to stay curious, you've got to stay focused on that, and you've got to keep learning. and you've got to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things.
So talking about curiosity and innovation, let's talk about anti-respective. I think I got that right. Tell us a bit about this business. Obviously, this is the new area that you're focusing on, and it's something that is very interesting. You're taking out to market. So what can we expect from this business, and where will it, how will it grow, and what will it push forward with?
I mean, what we're hoping to do is to take a new approach to AI. I think we are fundamentally an advisory business. I think a lot of it's about learning, a lot of it's about networking, all the things we've talked about. But ultimately, it's about understanding how that new world works. I think as part of a startup with a very different cost base, I've got a lot more scope to really focus on experimenting, testing hypotheses. I think it's also about it comes back to some of the things we've talked about. A lot of large organizations are very much structured around the technology of the business. I think this is an opportunity to try something different, to work with multiple organizations around helping to define what the new world looks like. And I think as a consultant, one of the first things I learned, I did a lot of innovation when I was in industry because it was my business, my team, my risk. I think quite often, as part of a large firm, quite understandably, clients will come in and they'll ask you, "Who's done this before? Where has this happened? Show me the case studies." I'm actually looking for an opportunity where I can go in and work in much more with partnership with clients to actually develop new ways of doing things. We don't know the rules. We don't know how this is going to pan out. I think if you look at how quickly the technology is advancing, I think it comes back to the early point. It's not just AI. Everybody's focused on AI, but I think if you look at AI, if you look at machine learning, if you look at quantum, if you look at some of the things that are coming from blockchain, the metaverse isn't dead. I think we looked at the metaverse, we got terribly excited, overexcited, then we walked away. The metaverse will come back for sure. And I think looking at all of those things and how they transform business, it's a great opportunity for me to learn, to research, to work with businesses, and to help shape some of that future. So we're still sketching the journey out, but it's very much an opportunity to experiment and work much more in partnership with clients rather than a traditional delivery model.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And so for you yourself, when you sit with leaders, what are the key things within AI that you're most excited about? That you feel like these are the elements that can really help businesses grow, expand, be more efficient, more productive.
So some of it's the ability to scale. I think a lot of people, a lot of my clients are still putting AI in a box mark technology. It's actually much closer to your world. It's a new type of resource. And I think starting to think of artificial intelligence, there's a clue in the name, as a new sort of intelligence.
As a kind of like a human being, like an employee.
A non-human resource, I think that's definitely the future. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, who should own the algorithms? But you wouldn't necessarily ask the HR director who should own the people. The reality is the CFO owns the finance people, and the CIO owns the IT people, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think one of the things that's most exciting to me, and one of the things I'm spending a lot of time learning, from clients and colleagues about, is what the new operating model works. So the idea of a hybrid workforce. Some of us are carbon-based, some of us are silicon-based. There's been a lot of focus on early versions of AI. I think it's getting much better, but the hallucinations, all the risks. The reality is, if I took 100 smart graduates, put them in a room, I'd get the same risk of hallucinations. I'd get the same challenge. I'd get the same bias. So I think looking at how you manage a completely new set of resources, I think it then opens possibilities that just aren't possible. Sometimes it's not physically possible or commercially viable to hire that many humans. You don't have enough office space to put that many humans in, although that's changing with hybrid working. But I think a lot of the old business models can be revisited and relooked at, just in terms of actually, I can process every single one of those documents. If you just look at something like the legal business, and you look at the huge cost of document discovery and the number of smart graduates who are having to read through every document. I can completely transform that. Does it mean I don't need as many smart graduates? Does it mean I don't need any smart graduates?
They can work better.
Does it mean I get them to do different things? And then, how do you manage that process? We're still learning about that. And every conversation I have about AI now ends up on culture, and it ends up on operating model, and it ends up on skills and organization design. And that's an area I'm really looking to learn more about.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And then from a leadership perspective, then, obviously the almost the elephant in the room with all these things is, what does this mean for me, right? So as I think more particularly, like, because we just said, this is like a non-human resource. Okay, I guess that the Industrial Revolution, the original one, was similar. Or washing machines maybe, or something. How do you deal with that? Because that is like, you talk about cultural issues, that is an actual live issue. I've found something that can do your job. We see this, don't we, in like the rail networks. A lot of their strikes are not necessarily about money so much, although there are money elements of that. They don't want one driver, they want someone to open the door, right? And it can be done, the door can be opened automatically, but they say, the unions say, I don't want to get too political here, that we need someone to open the door, but the train companies say, well, you don't. So what would your advice be about dealing with these sort of very, very big issues that sometimes leaders, like, you think about a leader's journey, they're not ready for this. They're not ready for those types of conversations, are they, so much?
It's a fascinating question. It's a fascinating example. I mean, I won't get too much into the politics. The reality is, you don't need a driver at all on a road. You don't need any humans on the train in order to make the train get from A to B on time and stop at the right stations. You may well need those humans for safety. You may well need those. It's very easy to look at every
or something.
Serve food. Well, no. It may well be that 99 journeys out of 100, you don't need those humans at all. The 100th journey, you're really, really pleased that you have them, because you've got something that wasn't programmed into the algorithm. And so it's very easy to say, right, I'm the AI guy, I'm really smart, you're stuck in the past, and I need to persuade you to my way of thinking. I think a lot of those people who have objections have real objections. And I think one of the things you should do is listen to them, understand them. I love those conversations. Yeah, but we've always done it this way. Why would we do it differently? That's where you learn. And that's the devil's in the detail. I think, self-driving cars, it's fine until you get to a roundabout or until you get to an unmarked road and things like that. Understanding those exceptions. Well, as long as the other car's self-driving, you're probably safe. If it's not, then there's exactly. But the reality is, I think we've got to have a dialogue. I don't think you should assume that this is the new right way of doing things. There is no right way of doing things, and I think it's one of the things that I've learned throughout my career. Listen to those objections. Listen to that conversation. Hopefully, you can find the answer. Why wouldn't I do this way? It's a conversation I was asked ages ago. I was rolling out a standard process with a global mining company in SAP. And I asked the question, why wouldn't you do it this way? And the answer was, because it's illegal in Brazil. And you know what? That's a really good answer. So for you, I'm going to change my process. So this is new. I think we are going to make mistakes. Safety is paramount. Ethical business is paramount. Compliance is paramount. So sometimes we want to err on the side of safety. But I think constantly revisiting those things, understanding it, looking at the data. I'm a data guy, understanding how many times things go wrong. But I think that's a dialogue. I think it's a culture change. Years ago, Toyota transformed their business by learning to listen to the people on the production lines. And that was the whole basis of the Toyota way. And I think, the idea that somebody like me or anybody else would come in with some artificial intelligence and say, right, I know how to run your business. Actually, you need to enlist the people who are doing those jobs, and you need to find a good outcome for them. It may well be that you find them more interesting things to do. It might well be that you give them more leisure time, whatever else. But I think, I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers. And I think we're still working that through. I think the hybrid workforce is really, really important. And there are some things that we absolutely can and should automate. And those tend to be the jobs that people don't want to do anyway. And then there are other things that you need a collaboration between people and algorithms, and the algorithms allow people to do better, faster, and cover more ground. I don't know if that's a
no, it's
straight
really,
answer,
I
but
think it's really interesting. I think, that's what it always feels like to me, is that, you've got to bring the people into the journey, right? You, as the leader, maybe, yes, you have a vision for how it's going to go, but I think particularly for this, because you're talking about people's jobs, how people do their jobs, what actually happens, how the business looks, which affects people personally, as well as the overall kind of objectives, like you said, the kind of ethics, etc., etc. So I think it's really important that, I'm sure this in your consultancy would be something you'd talk to. So how are you, well, I've had all these great ideas. How are we going to implement this without blowing everything else up? You know,
and I think that also comes back to sustainable business, and maybe that's
sure.
sustainability with the small s. If you think about, ultimately why most organizations are in business,
Yeah,
um, it is for the shareholders, it's for the community, it's
yeah,
for their colleagues, for their employees. You've got to think about all those reasons. And I think automation has lots of opportunities. I think we are genuinely moving towards the autonomous enterprise. I think at the
yeah.
moment we're doing some cool stuff with machine learning, and we've got some, some new ways of searching data. But I think that's only the beginning. I think the whole idea of actually, genuine lights out production line, lights out transport. I think we are moving definitely close to that. I think
Just as
understanding.
a quick question there, David, is there a company that you really look up to, like an organization you think like they're really leading the way? I'm really excited by what they're doing.
It's a really interesting question. I think no. I think is the short answer. I think
Fair enough. Yeah.
I
I mean,
think
that's a really interesting answer, isn't it? There's no
yeah.
one's getting it right.
Some maybe I'm showing my ignorance on this. I think lots of people are experimenting with this.
Hmm.
I think we're just starting to enter a world of AI at scale, and there are some organizations who I won't name who are telling me they're doing it, but at most stages we're still doing it in the lab. We're
Yeah.
testing this out. I think if you look at areas like medical research, I wouldn't name a particular company, but I think it's medicine has been transformed by AI.
Yeah.
And the reality is, algorithms will do a better job of analyzing your diagnostics than humans will. It's much easier to predict, medical conditions earlier. I think, when it comes to diagnosis in particular, and also, some of the life sciences, I think AI is much more embedded there already. I think we're
Yeah.
starting to look from a sustainability, new compounds, new ways of developing, whether it's drugs, whether it's metals, whether it's raw materials. I think that side of things has probably, again, I'm not sure I'd mention anybody by name who's a
No
particular
need.
leader in that.
Yeah.
I think it's how we take it out of that research area and bring it more into the day-to-day business. I don't really
Yeah.
see anybody who's there yet when it comes to the autonomous enterprise.
I guess when you look at, maybe defense is another one where you kind of, that's been driven quite a lot on AI. The numbers, the well, the the value of success in terms of both those industries, but the kind of the costs of actually getting there are so huge that even tweaks, like inches, by bringing in automation and that sort of thing, have such a huge effect on, like, the success and profitability of those businesses. So yeah, it's really, yeah, as we work more in those areas ourselves, we're starting to see, those particular areas like you mentioned about healthcare, life sciences, clinical research. Those seem to be the ones that are really driving this. It'll be interesting to see, because obviously again that's driven by the private sector, how that's brought into the public sector. Because obviously, again, like you said about the NHS, someone like that, they could really help all the problems they've got within the NHS by implementing this technology, couldn't they? I guess.
Potentially, yes. And
Yeah.
I'm certainly not an expert on that, but I think
Mm,
also if you look at the wealth of data that an
mm,
organization like the NHS holds, if you were able to monetize that safely and ethically, that would be a major source of funding for the NHS. It would also be a huge source of medical data that would actually help
Everyone.
everyone. Exactly
Yeah.
right. Now
I
that's
think we've just come across a great business idea there, David.
well,
Right,
yeah.
right on it.
I think others
I think we just shut the podcast down and just do
well,
that now.
but then it's a great thing to discuss on the podcast, and I think theoretically, I think it's a wonderful idea. The complexity of actually implementing that, the legacy of existing data, the permissions that you'd need to get from everybody, it comes back to those things. That's not a reason not to do it. It's just a reason that makes it harder. And I think with most of these things, if you were starting with a blank piece of paper, you design them very, very differently, hence the startup.
Exactly.
You know, but actually, a lot of the challenge for our existing organizations is how do you manage that legacy? Do you have the permissions to use that data? Do you have the processes? Is that data correctly classified? And all the way through this at the moment, we've been talking about structured data, even whether it's medical records, whether it's financial records, whether it's data that I've got in my data lake. All that tends to be structured data. When it comes to video recordings, audio recordings, email trails, all these things that AI is suddenly starting to open that up. And I think the business opportunities are even bigger in unstructured data than they are in structured data. And it's the Wild West. I mean, if I look at my personal inbox, how well structured is that? What's in there? What's confidential? I think starting to think about some of those things. It's a very, very different way of working. But it's not impossible, and it's quite easy to do that. And I think probably the thing I'm most excited about, which is one of the things we're going to be looking at through the next few months in Antirospective, is you need AI to get your data ready for AI. There are not enough skilled humans on the planet to actually manage the exabytes of data that we've got in terms of structured, unstructured data. There's so much data being produced just to navigate that, to manage that, to govern this. I don't think it's possible to do it the way we used to do it. The manual processes, the sampling, the
Excel spreadsheets.
Well, but even the way we've governed critical fields, and we've governed the most sensitive data. In a world of AI, you need to govern everything. You need to control everything. You need to be able to tag everything. The answer is AI will also provide the solution to getting our data ready, structured, and safe for AI. And I think that's a fascinating area. It will transform what I do. It will transform the world of data governance, data strategy, data management. And I don't think we've really tapped into the full potential of that yet.
So we obviously talk very much about data and AI and where it's kind of going. For you yourself, what are you most interested in as a leader now in a different sort of environment? So obviously you come from a large organization into something where you're really kind of building something. So how does that feel for you thus far? And what are you most excited about yourself as a leader of a different type of company?
So I'm a leader in a very small company, small company. Right now, we're a company of one. And I think that in itself, I think I'm learning about network business models. I'm learning about the alliances and the relationships that you build with other small companies with similar levels. I'm learning again. I think the other thing that I'm really enjoying is becoming hands-on. I think when you become a leader in a large organization and you've got hundreds of people working for you, sometimes you become disconnected from what brought you there in the first place. So my guilty pleasure is I'm quite enjoying going back and coding myself. I'm quite enjoying actually doing things. I'm having some chance to spend the day thinking about things, as opposed to being on constant Teams meetings. And I think, certainly for me, everything that I'm trying to do now is around understanding the new paradigm, understanding the new way of working. And I think having some space, not being in constant meetings, not being in back-to-back half-hour video conferences, which becomes, there's still a little bit of that, but not that much. And then learning again. This is very, very different. It feels very, very different. If I need help, I don't know who I'd pick the phone up to. I'm starting to build my own network around this. And I think the idea of a network business model, it's something that's very, very new to me, and I'm really enjoying learning. I'll make some mistakes, I'll find some blind alleys, but I'm actually enjoying being out there and doing something I've never done before.
That's brilliant. And I'm hopeful, David, that you are, I was like kind of practicing in your preach. So trying to build automation and AI and data processes into the growth of the business. So you might, never know, like you might be one of the largest consultancies in data, but you've still only got 2 actual human employees. You know what I mean? That would be a
Well,
wonderful thing, right?
I love that idea. I think that that changes margins. It changes the cost of the services you can provide.
Mm,
It changes the scale. I think that's also interesting. I mean, there's another thing that I'm very, very interested in, which is social mobility. So I
yeah,
think that at some point we all need to look at how we can give back, and I'm very interested in, the whole diversity agenda,
yeah,
particularly around diversity of thought and diversity of social background. I
yeah,
think if you look at some of the barriers to entry that disappear when you're using AI, when you're paying potentially per prompt, paying on a monthly basis, you don't have to invest in offices. So
yeah,
there's a huge part, and there's a couple of organisations I'm working on. I can't really say too much about
mm,
this at the moment, but watch this space. I'll come back to you. I think there's a number of organisations who have started to look at how we can use AI to help drive on entrepreneurship in underserved communities. People who have the brains, who have the drive, but don't necessarily have the financial resources. I think it's much easier to stand up an automated business, and it's much easier to get access to those tools. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll see a whole new generation of startups coming from, new places, new individuals, and some new ways of thinking coming into the
yeah.
industry.
I guess you see that in like kind of like influencer sort of environments, not really our sort of
Yeah.
thing, David, like TikTokers, that sort of thing, those social media companies, much as they're maligned, have given anyone the same level of insane, technology that they can use. And then you become an influencer based on your skills, right? Not whether you understand how to program and make this video and stuff. It's just you being funny or you being happy to jump off cliffs or something.
I think it's a great example because I think if you've got something that people are genuinely interested in, that people genuinely need, you can reach them,
Yeah,
and you can reach them relatively cheaply.
yeah,
And there's lots of ways of doing that. I think AI will help us. I guess I was going to turn the question around to you because one of the sectors I'd be looking at is recruitment as well.
yeah.
So I would have thought, how are you using this in GCS?
I love it. I love it when people do that to me. So that's very good. And I think that the way we're part of a greater group called Engage, right? So the way that we look at it is that there are processes within recruitment. Um, you know, finding a finding a job, building a relationship, qualifying the job, finding the candidate, arranging the interview, you know, going through the process, customer experience, client experience, and there's things, everything needs to be done well, right? The problem in our business is that you do that for free. So it's not like EY where you get paid on the hour. You only get paid for the success, right? You're a success based, you're a contingency based business, right? Um, so I think for us, the way we look at it is that I would be amazed. Let's say, for instance, I was to place someone like yourself, David, right? I would be amazed if in a whole search and selection process, you were never able to speak to a human being. It just wouldn't, I don't think you would feel, I don't know, maybe you would because you obviously from the background you come from, but would you feel like I could go through that whole process and never speak to a human being? I doubt it. You'd need maybe someone to talk to you through the job, maybe prep you up for the interview, maybe negotiate for you, that sort of thing. Those types of elements I think are key. And obviously there's other ways of finding jobs, but that's what people use recruiters for. But I think there's so much that we do that is automatable,
Hmm.
that can be progressed quicker. And I think obviously that's good for us in terms of a business because it makes us more productive, more efficient, maybe makes our charges better because we're more productive and more efficient. But I think it helps us to provide a much better service for our clients. If you say to me, like at the moment, I've got to keep it all in my head, little black book, that sort of thing. But if I've got really, really powerful AI and automation tools that can really help me to use all the structured data I've got. So if you give me a CDO role, I can use really powerful tools to help me to find like the perfect people. So the perfect people I'm speaking to are just right for you and can match it really well. I mean, we do quite a lot of hands-off work now. So, you know, with things like nurses, that sort of thing, shift work, that sort of thing, hands-off work. So the client can interact immediately with a candidate. So we look at it that there's probably 80% of our work that can be automated, improved, perfected by using technology. Recruiters aren't always great at using technology because they're very much of the like, well, I do it best. But if we embrace it, I think that we will be able to provide a better service for our customers and probably a more cost effective, which is obviously, it's always a grudge purchase, I think, when you use a recruiter, right? You're like, really, I just paid him 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 for that guy. What did he do? Obviously, the interesting thing is, and we always talk about it, is that people can't see, or you as a manager can only see, you sent me the CV or the resume, and then I called him up and arranged the interview, and then that's all he did. And I paid him 40,000 for that privilege. Obviously, as with all these things, there's a lot of going on behind it to kind of get to that point where I email you over the CV. But I think a lot of that work can be automated, and therefore we can do a much better piece of work for the business, for industry, and also probably a much better priced, because a lot of the price is in that work getting to sending the CV. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a fascinating answer, and I think there's whether there's a Pareto principle, whether 80% of the value is in the 20%. There's an awful lot of CD screening research and things like that that could be very easily pushed off, which allows you to focus on your skill set. It's that human piece. I think that's applicable to lots of other industries. I mean, it's interesting your comment about consulting. And one of the other things that I'm looking at very hard is most traditional consulting models, not all, but most traditional consulting models are still based on time and materials. I want, 25 people at a day rate of $1,000 a day. And, I estimate that this will be 100 days work. I think AI changes that. I think if we only charge for the human time, then we're not going to make enough money, and it won't be viable to us. You've got to move from input-based.
You have two people doing this work now.
Exactly, yeah. So you've got to move from something that's input-based to something that's output-based. And I think you're going to have to start sharing more risk.
They would call that consultancy as a service, wouldn't they, David?
Well,
You'd be buying blocks of knowledge
and and it's very easy to say that. It's quite hard to do. How do you measure the outcome? How do you, but the reality is, I don't think a time and materials model is going to work anymore. And I think for clients, I mean, either this is a rush to the bottom, where everybody, reduces their margins, starts to reduce salaries, starts to hire cheaper resources, or you change the nature of your resources, you change the training, you upskill. I think you can already see we're moving from a traditional pyramid shape to more of a diamond, whereas actually it's that middle layer. It's the people with deep expertise, the people with 10 years plus experience, the people with deep sector expertise. Those are the people who add value. And a lot of the bottom of that pyramid is now going to be driven by AI. And that requires a different pricing model because, the way we've traditionally done it, it won't work anymore. And I think the people who get that right first will be able to reduce the cost to their clients without significantly reducing their margins. And I think, that's an area I'm fascinated to learn more about. I don't have the answers. I have the questions, and I'm very, very keen to go out and start experimenting with this.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully, and we'll bring it to a close now, David. Hopefully, by listening to this, people will think the two Davids. Either I'll reach out to David and I help to build my AI project, or reach out to David and help to find some AI people. But it's been really, really interesting to speak to you, David. I'm sure we'll speak more over the coming months and years. It's really great to meet you, and I wish you well with your new business venture. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much indeed, David. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm looking forward to a new series of podcasts. Very, very exciting. So thank you.
you.